When I heard the referendum result, I think I felt two main things. First of all, I wasn't surprised. I think it was always going to be a very close result, one way or the other, and so I wasn't very surprised that Leave managed a narrow victory. Secondly, I think I felt apprehensive, and I think that feeling hasn't really changed since June 2016. Apprehensive both for the UK, because it was obvious that this was going to be a very damaging, a very destabilising decision for the economy, for society, for the political system, but also apprehensive, just as importantly, for the rest of the European Union, because I knew that this was going to send a very bad message to the rest of Europe that if you're a demagogue, if you're a charlatan, if you lie big, you can win too. And I think that feeling of apprehension feels like it's been borne out by subsequent results. Le Pen may not have got into office in France, but when we look at Poland, at Hungary, at Italy, at Sweden, I think Brexit has sent a very bad message to the rest of Europe. Populists can win. I'm trying not to let the result change the way that I see the UK for a couple of reasons. First of all, part of my job now is to travel around the country, meeting hundreds and thousands of people to talk about Brexit, and I'm meeting lots and lots of very dedicated, very passionate people who know that the referendum result is a bad one, procured by very undesirable means. But secondly as well, I know that a lot of the people who happened to vote Leave in June 2016 did so in a very well-meaning way, wanting the best for themselves, for their families, for the country, and they didn't necessarily vote Leave because they're bigots or they're stupid or they're nasty people. So I'm trying not to let it have an effect on my perception of the UK and British people. Having said that, it is fair to say that it's made me a lot more self-conscious about not being English in England. Especially when I'm in some of the smaller towns in the countryside, I become very conscious of my accent. I become very conscious of how people might react to me, whether that's fair or that's not, and I've become also quite sensitive to the questions which have become a lot more common now. Oh, where are you from? Oh, you're from Northern Ireland. When are you going back home? And I think that sort of slightly pernicious sense that if you're not speaking with an English accent, you somehow are a little bit suspect, or you might not belong here, is one that it's quite difficult to avoid. Whether it's justified or not, it's one that it's quite difficult to shake off. I think Brexit is going to have a very profound effect on the UK's place in the world. If we think about what the UK has been up until now, it's been one of the leading powers inside one of the most important international organisations on earth. The UK played a leading role within the EU, and through the EU exercised greater influence across the world, and Brexit is basically throwing that away. The world doesn't belong to medium-sized European countries. The world doesn't belong to them. It belongs to power blocks, to regional power blocks and great powers. And the Leave campaign did a good job of conning a lot of people into thinking that the UK could defy the basic laws of international relations and international trade, but it can't. And I'm afraid the truth of Brexit is that it's an act of long-term and really quite profound national diminishment for the UK. And it will have also a poor impact on the rest of the EU and the EU's influence on the rest of the world as well. I think if I were to use one word to describe how I feel since the referendum, it would be determined. I think it's easy to say angry or sad or frustrated, but those are things which don't necessarily get you very far. I think what the situation calls for is determination. Determination not to let a group of, frankly, quite dangerous right-wing ideologues ruin the country, but equally not to let them get away with accountability and responsibility for the consequences of their own action. So I think that's my main feeling, is determination to do my job and also to prevent, as far as any of us can, the consequences of what these people have done, but also to try as far as we can to hold them account and hold them responsible for the consequences of what they've done. It was very obvious, even before the referendum in 2016, that the question of the Irish border was going to be one of the most important and one of the most difficult of the problems that would be raised by a Leave victory in that referendum. Anybody who denies that they didn't see this coming, or anyone who denies that it isn't really a problem, is living on another planet. It is a serious problem. It's a very, very difficult problem. And it's made worse by the fact that the UK government has been promising irreconcilable things to different groups of people. And at some stage, they're going to have to find a solution where somebody is disappointed. We just have to decide who that somebody is. Will it be the EU in Ireland? Will it be the DUP in Northern Ireland? Will it be Leave campaigners in England? But somebody at one point is going to be deeply disappointed at the outcome of whatever solution there happens to be to the Northern Irish border in question. Of course, when you think about who might benefit from the whole process of Brexit, there are always going to be people who can make an industry out of a crisis. The lawyers are probably doing quite well. The customs brokers are probably going to see some new opportunities for work. But that's really fairly incidental, I think, to the bigger picture. The bigger picture is that there are going to be a lot of losers out of Brexit. There are going to be a lot of people, there already are a lot of people, whose lives are disrupted, whose jobs might be endangered, whose standard of living might fall. And so I think really maybe the question isn't who's the winner out of Brexit, but who are the losers. And in that category, I'm afraid to say, we have to put the very large number of people who voted Leave because they genuinely believed the promises about what leaving the EU was going to bring to them and the problems that it was going to solve. Many of the claims that were made by the Leave campaign had nothing to do with EU membership. Many of the things that they promised are not going to be delivered because of leaving the EU. And so I think we're going to end up with a lot of people who feel doubly let down by their political system. They were already let down before, and they're going to feel doubly let down because a lot of these promises are not going to be delivered on and cannot be delivered on. But Brexit has had a very important effect on my professional life, obviously, and in ways which, much to the irritation of many Leave campaigners, have been very positive for me in a professional sense. First of all, it's opened up an entirely new field of research, whether we like it or not, whether we think it's a good thing or a bad thing. There's an enormous amount of work to be done by people like me to understand what leaving the EU means, to track the negotiations, to look at the impact upon the UK as a legal system and upon the EU as a legal system. And so in a way, Brexit has given people like me a lifetime worth of work to do, and it's very interesting, it's very challenging work. I think the second main way in which it's had an impact on my professional life, though, is that I've become a lot more engaged in public activity, public-facing activity. I'm no longer an academic who simply works at his desk or in his study at home on my computer, reading and writing and thinking about things. I'm spending a lot of time travelling the country, travelling across Europe, giving public talks, public question and answer sessions, engaging very directly with my fellow citizens and trying to communicate to them some of the things that I'm working on as a researcher so that they can better understand what Brexit means and they can be better informed as citizens in the whole political process around Brexit. And I think that's really interesting and really rewarding as well. So maybe there is a positive to Brexit. It's a pity that the positive happens to be for me professionally.